You look at, like, my parents, for instance. Like, if it was in the newspaper, it was real.
And my daughters, if it's on TikTok, it's real.
Dad, Rogan would say,
did you see that Donald Trump is invading Russia? What?
Look,
it was on TikTok.
This is TYC 3 Yellow Chairs with Spanky Moskowitz.
This is the germination of a seed we planted almost a decade ago while we were sitting at Culinary Dropout, a bar in Phoenix, having a conversation. There were a bunch of friends, all from the broadcast industry at the time, and we were talking about life, sex, politics, religion, all the things you should never talk about with friends because they just cause arguments and debate. Well, you can see that stuff on social. We decided to call it Modem, Meeting of the Minds. We had no idea at the time. It was actually our first ever mastermind. We had never read any of Napoleon Hill's stuff at that point, and we founded it there. 10 years later, we're actually recording our first episode ever. It's a special edition of TYC, episode 1 of Modem, Meeting of the Minds.
Wasn't it the meeting of the dysfunctional minds?
Well, I took out dysfunctional.
I
I felt like we became better.
Nah, I think I'm still dysfunctional, but that's okay.
First of all, to have human beings in front of me is so nice.
Yeah.
it's amazing.
Pamela, I saw you just a couple of days ago on my driveway. We had a little graduation celebration for my son Mason, and we had like polar ice, not polar ice. Oh gosh, what am I calling it?
Hawaiian ice.
Hawaiian
right?
ice,
The
yeah,
Kona
shave ice,
Yeah,
Kona
yeah,
ice. Thank
yeah.
you. Come out to the driveway, and we had like it was basically a drive-by icing. You can come by, get one, say hi, and leave. And but it's so nice to have human contact. Like the fact that I got hugs from both of you was remarkable because I was so hug deficient. My hug tank is so low right now.
We'll get another hug on the way out.
Absolutely.
Hug it out.
We'll hug it out.
Okay.
I think it's going to take a few months for me to recover from my hug deficiency, honestly.
Good to know.
Okay. Let's just start at New Year's Eve, December 31st, 2019.
Seems like a lifetime ago, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It was 6 months ago.
Well, everything was normal then. He was like, oh, here we go, another year. This is going to be my year. 2020 is going to be the year. I'm going to make some changes.
But that's the thing that has changed the most for me is what is normal. Because my life has changed dramatically since New Year's Day. And, I mean, all of our lives have changed with, COVID and, now George Floyd and everything that's going on with the news and politics and all those kinds of things. But, like, personally, my life has changed. So here I am, like, 6 months later in a whole new world.
Sing it.
Yeah. A dazzling place I never knew.
6 months ago, she never would have sang that song.
No.
Now she's free to sing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it is free. I think that's a good way to describe it. Mm-hmm. So, New Year's Eve for you.
Man.
Go from there to here.
All right. Well, okay. I was New Year's Eve still waking up 2:30 in the morning, going to work. Now, as of March, I have like a normal schedule. So that's been a huge change for me because I've been able to sleep and rest and live like a normal person somewhat to not be driving to work in the dark. Now I drive home in the dark, but that's a different story. So that's been a huge change. But the day we launched the talk show, the new afternoon talk show, was like right when coronavirus started to happen. So the first day we did like half coronavirus, half like politics. The next day it was all coronavirus. That led right into Floyd. So we haven't talked about anything except for...
You've had two topics that have been fueling your
in 3
life.
months. Yes.
I just kind of want to back up for a second, though, because I don't want to assume that your audience knows who we are and what our relationship as friends.
I was going to go back to that in a moment. I wanted to start with the December 31st.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
New Year's Eve at my house has been historically lobsters and friends, and we did that normal traditional thing. And I was looking at 2020 with just some like, wow, this is going to be a great year for the businesses. Mm-hmm. This is going to be a great year for my family. My son is graduating. He's looking at colleges to play football. Like, things are good. And we went on a cruise.
Nah.
And for those of you who have seen or are fans of The Walking Dead, episode 1, season 1. Rick wakes up in a hospital after a shootout with some bad guys. And when Rick wakes up, the flowers are dead. By the way, that air conditioning system you can thank, courtesy of the building. It is, I know.
We're going to take flight.
This is not a radio station. And so he wakes up in the hospital bed. The flowers are dead. The water pitcher is empty. His IV is dry. He pulls the needle out of his arm and walks into a hallway of chaos. And, like, the place is just, it's destroyed. And as he walks down the hallway, there's chains on a door and there's a sign, dead inside, and he's like, what the heck is going on? And he starts pulling on, and all of a sudden these zombies start coming out. The zombie apocalypse began that way in season 1, episode 1 of The Walking Dead. Now, back to my cruise ship. I am on a cruise ship. We are doing the Mexican Riviera. It was spring break. We were having a great time. And I was checking in on sales numbers and messaging the team. I would check once or twice a day just to keep in touch with people back here on land. And all of a sudden, I started seeing news alerts about the COVID virus and stores running out of supplies and toilet paper shortages. These words I never thought would pass my lips. I ordered bidets on a cruise ship because I saw that toilet paper was out of stock.
You were one of those. There was like a 5,000% increase or something in orders.
I ordered them before the price spike. So my bidets were like way less expensive than, like, my sister-in-law paid double what I paid. By the way, once you go bidet, you will never go back.
Okay.
I went to Japan in 2018 and they got some advanced bidets. You can aim, shoot, and fire, change the temperature,
Locked and
change the
loaded,
pressure.
ready to go.
Yeah, be careful if you miss though. You're like, woo! Missed.
So we started right into December 31st. Now let's go back and talk about why you guys are here. We grew up together. Well, actually, I was like the
Old fart. Did that fall out? That just fell out. Sorry.
The wise old sage.
The veteran?
Yeah.
the veteran. I was the veteran of the group.
Wise old sage.
We all met in the dysfunctional world of radio. Mm-hmm. We were all in the broadcast industry. I was the creative director, and Pamela, you started as an intern. That's when I met you.
Yeah.
And Rob, you came in as an executive, as a producer for a talk show host who had just moved from
Dallas.
Mm-hmm. That's right. It just takes putting all the pieces together. Mm-hmm. So
that's what happens when you're the old fart. I mean, veteran.
Yes. And so we met in radio. We became friends there for many, many years. Pamela, everybody joked you were my work wife.
Yeah.
And we have developed this incredible bond and friendship that has now gone on beyond the industry. Mm-hmm. And I'm grateful for that. So Pamela, you just a quick intro, who you are, where you came from, what you did, and then Rob.
Oh, yeah, okay. So, we met at a radio station. All of us met at the radio station. And that's where my life had been really centered for pretty much the last 2 decades. And it has been within the last few years where I decided that wasn't where I wanted to continue my life. Love news, have a passion for it, but things have gotten quite negative, and it took a toll, and I needed to change. And I took a big risk in making a choice to make a change, and that was why 2020 has been massively different for me, because this identity that we all create with what we do, it's a big part of who we are. It's not who we are, but it's a big aspect of it.
Sure.
For me, has always been tied up in media and the news and an on-air personality. And stepping away from that has been fantastic in certain regards, super challenging in others. So for me right now, building a business, you're helping me with building that business, and I had made a conscious decision that I was going to go from telling everybody what's wrong in the world with news to helping them figure out what's right within themselves. And so that's what I'm working on right now.
That's super cool. And I love that. Because you're in the lane you should be in.
Thank you.
And it shows. Like, the weight of the world is off of your shoulders. And when I see you, I see a completely different you.
I feel different. Like, I feel I'm thinking different. I'm acting different.
Your voice is different.
I feel lighter. And what was really interesting for me is I always knew that there was a heaviness to news. I mean, come on.
Right.
You know, we always joke, we don't talk about when the plane lands safely at the airport
Right.
because we expect that to happen. We talk when there's a plane crash. So we tell you about the horrible things that are going on in this world, and they take a toll. I only began to unpack about 2 years ago the toll that it was taking. And it took me 2 years to make choices and decisions in driving what I wanted to do in my own life, instead of just being on the default setting of this is what's expected of me. This is where I've already had success.
Right.
So I'm going to stay in that comfort bubble of this success. I broke out of that. It's scary as hell, but it's also extremely empowering, exciting, and there's just opportunity everywhere.
Learning to live in that discomfort, which is uncommon.
Yes. Okay, so I've been telling Rob so much, you know, discomfort is the currency to your dreams. You know,
Right.
for all of us, we don't like to be uncomfortable. We don't like to have that discomfort. We do everything in our power to run from it and get away from it because it just
Or
feels
medicate over it.
Oh, yeah. You drink, you eat, you shop, you do whatever it may be just because we don't want to have that feeling. But, like, that feeling is what motivates the change. And for me, I had that feeling in news of just being uncomfortable all the time and not liking what I was talking about, not wanting to tell people about shootings and politics and mass murder. It's like, no, I was so uncomfortable. And that discomfort I allowed to be there. I didn't run from it. And it has made change. And I think it's going to make some huge change for me in the future as well.
I think you're well on your way to
I'm excited.
where, I can see it. Your energy just just flies out of you.
And credit to Pamela, too, because, you know, she was one of the only successful female talk show hosts in the entire country. There's only like a handful that do it. And as well and as big of a stage that she was able to do it. And to be able to walk away from that, that's ballsy, number one. I use that word on purpose because she's a female talk show host. But the point is, to be like that high up and be able to walk away shows you the kind of gravitas that Pamela actually has, because that's such an easy lane to stay in and go,
Absolutely.
I'm already here. Like,
Why should I leave this?
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Why
so
should I leave this?
that is a huge hurdle to overcome, and to be able to just, like, you know, may have taken her a couple of years, but that's sometimes you see that hurdle and you're like, because I'm still looking at mine and I'm like, that's kind of high.
Well, you got a lot of hurdles right now. I mean, you have gone from, you know, talk show host, producer, anchor, reporter, manager, back to talk show host.
Yep.
And, like, you know, there's a point in time where you're like, is this really what I want to do? Is it not? Because of the challenges that you and I and the three of us have talked about for so many years.
Yeah, and that's kind of it. It's like, you know, you're trying to work through all this in your head, and then you say, okay, now's an opportunity to lead. So kind of back up. I came in, we worked for a station that was an AM station. We flipped to FM. I came in the week after we flipped to FM.
Really? Is
Back
that when
in
you came in?
2007, yeah.
Wow.
And the only reason I didn't come the immediate day was because I had to give 2 weeks' notice to my other job. I didn't get the job offer until December 23rd or something.
I love that you remember that.
Yeah.
You're like
and I
my
moved
dad. You
here.
remember those dates.
Yeah, I think my first day was the 9th of January 2007, whatever the Monday was. And I remember thinking, because Daryl was the guy I came to work with.
Should we ask her? Because she'll tell us.
Yes. What was the first Monday in Joe? It was the second Monday in January, I guess. Because I think it was January 2nd when you guys flipped to FM.
Right.
And it was so antsy because I was just I was living in Farmington, New Mexico, and I was like, get me out of here. But I did the right thing. And I remember I got a call from I arrived in Phoenix on Saturday, drove 7.5 hours, and he calls me. He's like, hey, come to brunch tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. And I'm like, I do not get up early on Sunday. So I dragged myself out of bed, and he's like, hey, I got this story I want you to get working. I'm like, I haven't even signed my paperwork yet, man. Had to book a guest. That was my intro to that station, an intro to
Baptism
both of you guys.
by fire.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yep.
But I was able to find the guest on a Sunday, calling around. I'm like, man, is this what's going to be like? That's what it was like. So I did that for a while. Eventually had a talk show. Worked with Pamela on the show what we were working on at the time. Then got my own show. Then didn't have a show and didn't have a job. And found another job at another station in town. Still there 6 years later. Amazing how the time goes.
It's been 6 years.
Yeah.
Wow.
Just about.
Like I was thinking,
about.
you've been there, what, 2 years?
Yeah.
6 years?
Almost 6, 5.5.
Oh, my
Yeah.
God.
Crazy. Absolutely crazy. And now here we are, sitting here today.
It's funny. I as much as I've been out of the industry now for a decade,
That's crazy to me, too.
That is wacky.
I've been out for that long, and I am so deeply connected to people in the industry, but not the industry itself. I've created this just wall of separation between me and all of that, but the people that I care about remain close to me because it wasn't about the industry, it's about the people and the relationships.
Well, that's what life should
And-
be about.
Absolutely, but a lot of people forget that, and they just are so attached to what they do, right? What they do becomes who they are versus just a part of who they are.
Well, and especially for you, Spanky, too, in that you had all these years working at these big radio stations, working on the creative side and making the magic happen and how the sausage is made to be able to be where you're at and kind of leave that behind, too. Same thing with Pamela. It's like that huge hurdle, and you just walked up to them and said, okay, it's time. Time to jump over the hurdle.
I'll tell you something that I didn't. Sorry, Zach got you.
Me.
Yeah.
Where's HR around here? Right?
Don't worry, if he grabs too hard, his hand will fall off.
Okay,
So
good. I'm like, you're a creep, dude.
Double tap. You'll be fine. Take care of them.
that's right.
Yeah.
Just hit, spike in the head. Something that I didn't talk about, and I realized that I didn't leave it out with intent. It was just such a blip in my life. But Russ, a mutual friend of ours, said you should have put that in your book. Was the story? There was a little story that was missing between the time I left broadcasting and the time I really started growing my business. And
That's a big story. That's not a little story.
Right, but
'cause that
but-
made you who you are.
correct.
Yeah.
But I missed it because it was such a painful moment for me. I think subconsciously I buried it. So let's talk about that for a second. I made the decision December 7th, 2010. I do remember that date, a
There you
date
go.
that shall live in infamy.
No, it's true. Yeah.
And
funny.
that was the date that I decided I was done in the industry. There was nothing more I could accomplish. And I made the choice to have a conversation with my boss. And I said, there's nothing more I can do here. I feel like I've done everything and I don't want your job. What's next? And I didn't know what was next at the time. And he was gracious enough to say, this conversation didn't happen. And when you decide what you want to do, come talk to me. And so I made a decision, had some conversations, and then I went and took the leap and wound up going to head up I was VP of media for my business partner's other company. He wasn't my business partner then. I went to work for his company. And I did that for 2 years until the opportunity that I had always wanted, that I dreamed about, was in front of me. And so this is the part that was not in the story in the book, but this is the part that really shaped my trajectory or pointed me in the right direction. And I wound up getting an offer to become the creative director of an ad agency. And that was my dream job. Like, if there was anything else in life that I could accomplish, it would be like maybe the president. No, I don't want that job.
Yeah.
Okay.
Definitely not now.
No.
Yeah. I'm going to think twice about that
Yeah.
one.
So I left Ken and Brandon and their business. Great relationship, great friends, but I had this opportunity I had to take. And I realized right after I went there to become the creative director of this agency that it was the biggest mistake of my life, because I was working for an asshole. I was working for a narcissist. I was working for a guy who didn't value creative control by your creative director, but
So you want to become the president, you end up working like a guy who's like the president.
yes.
Okay, just check.
And so I wound up, I was miserable, and I was there for a few months, helped build a bunch of great campaigns, did a great campaign for the city of Flagstaff, WTF, Why Travel Flagstaff was one of them, and then they lost the bid and he blamed me. There was a whole bunch of ugliness, and then out of the blue, I was fired. I was there a very short time, the highest paid individual in that company, and the rug was pulled out from under me. And I panicked. I had 5 kids. I didn't know what I was going to do. I had no marketable skills other than I'm a super creative human being with a lot of ideas. I'm an idea generator. That's the only thing I got. And I panicked, and I remembered calling. I can remember each conversation I had with individual friends, and I know I was crying like a freaking 2-year-old because I was scared.
Painful.
I was scared. I was in my 40s and unemployed with 5 kids. What the hell was I going to do? And it was in that moment that I was pushed, and I was really grateful for this. My then CPA, Seth, who's also a friend for many years, looked at our financials, and he said, look, you've got a year to figure this out. You've got enough money to survive for a year. But you're so good, man. Just start your own thing. Do your own thing. Create it. And I had already started doing my own thing on the side, but I had never fully brought it into like, this is going to be my business. This is going to
You've
be.
always had a side hustle.
I've always had side hustles.
As far as I've ever known
Always.
you. Remember when you were flying planes? Remember that?
Yes.
You've always had a side hustle.
always-
And that's the funny thing when you get to know Spanky. It's like, I did this, I flew planes, I did this, I had a wedding DJ. And you're like,
Yeah.
what?
Well, he was supposed to be my wedding DJ. And then my photographer for my wedding canceled, and so we had somebody else from the radio station become my wedding DJ, and he became my photographer. Like, this guy's lived, I don't know how many lives.
I know.
Well, I've cheated death 3 times. So I've got 9 lives, so I've got at least 6 more cheats, right?
Perfect. But I remember going back to when you were working for that, when you were the creative director, you were in a similar position that Pamela was in. And now that this is all together in the same room, I remember sensing the kind of same energy you both had, because you knew it wasn't right and you knew it wasn't right.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So you had that sort of that stress about you both. And, obviously where we're at today, it's supposed to happen that way.
Right, absolutely. And everything happens for a reason, and it's funny, in the moment when bad shit happens, you don't think about everything happens for a reason. You just think, oh, fuck, right? Because that was my reaction was, oh, fuck, now what? Mm-hmm. And so I'm sitting in Seth's office, and we're looking at the financials, and Seth's like, dude, you were so good. Go out and do your own thing. And that side hustle that you were talking about was my other company, Wedgie Media. And we had already won the M&M's commercial, and a side hustle. And M&M's was our first big client. And then we got to do the Budweiser bow tie can commercial, and and then we got to do a spec for Sam Adams, which was a piece of shit. I don't want to talk about it. Do you remember that?
I do.
Okay.
That was fun. I was in that one. I like that one.
But it was the worst ad ever. But I realized that I had the ability within me to do something, to either rise up and prove it or fail. And for a brief moment, I thought, maybe I should just go back to my comfort zone. Maybe I should just go back to the industry. And I opted to go in that direction. Mm-hmm. And I had a lunch meeting.
I remember.
And I was ready to go. In fact,
They made an announcement. You sent out the email.
And I know that it was met with a lot of people were thrilled.
Oh, yeah.
But in my heart, in my gut,
It was
I
a
was
nice
like,
long email, too.
I'm like, I can't do it. And I made the really bold decision at that point to not come back. And at that point, I became an enemy of the state.
Well, no, but I mean, at that point in time, you made a decision and you staked your claim.
I did.
Because when you made that decision, there was no going back.
There was no going back.
You burned a bridge.
I did burn a bridge.
And so that meant, you burned the boats,
Yeah.
right? You got to take it now.
Yeah. So I was on the island by myself. And my CPA's firm became my first client, and then my first not big brand client. And then from there, it just grew, and it grew, and it grew.
There's so much goodness in that story that you just shared. And one, a lot of times we plan from our past and not our future. And so in that time frame of, who you were and where you were going, you kept kind of looking in your rearview mirror of, well, this is what I know. This is what I could do. And you kept looking back. But it was when the rug got pulled out from underneath you and you had to make some really difficult choices, that you started looking as to who you want your future self to be.
Correct.
And in that moment, you had the confidence to become that. And what's super cool is a lot of times when we make those choices to become something else or want to become something else, and we fail along the way, what's going to determine whether or not you push forward or you quit is what you make that failure mean.
Yep.
So here you are now as a business owner of what, 3 companies?
Yeah.
And you look back on that moment where the ad agency pulled the rug out from underneath you. Does that even have an impact on you right now?
Yes.
But I mean, like an emotional impact.
No.
In that, like, but in that moment, you thought you were a failure, that your
Yep.
kids aren't going to eat.
Life was over.
And how am I going to go on?
I was like, welfare. Like, literally, I thought, oh my God, we're going to go on food stamps.
But what I'm just offering is that you chose to keep moving forward.
Yes.
You kept choosing to go to your future self, and that's led you to where you are now. That moment could have defined you, and you could have been back in radio, miserable.
Yep.
In other words, you would have quit on the dream that you wanted to become. So it's really important that as you're moving towards a new goal in life, when you fall down, when you make a mistake, when you fail, whatever the hell it is that you want to call it, it's so important to take a look at what you make that mean. Because if you make it mean, okay, you know what, this didn't work, now I'm going to do this, you're going to get closer to where you want to go. If you make it mean that you're a failure, you're going to quit. But just sitting here as a wildly successful business owner,
Your own creative director, if you will.
Yeah.
success is built on a pile of failures.
Right.
It's just a matter of what you make those failures mean.
Yeah. You know, for me, I look back at that time and I am so grateful to Doug, the guy who fired me, for what he did. At the time, it was horrible. Looking in the rearview mirror, it was amazing. And I'll share something with you that I was told not to do, but I did it anyway because people can't tell me what to do. And at the 1-year mark of my being fired and the company having at that point taken off really nicely, I sent pizzas on a Friday to his office with a thank you note. And I was told not to do it. My wife was like, don't do it. That's going to be a dick move. And I'm like, no. So I literally just I ordered pizzas and sent them with a thank you note. Mm-hmm. And I just said, thank you for firing me. It was the best thing you could have ever done. And that's all I said. Mm-hmm. I wasn't.
It's like a peace offering, right? It's like I'm moving on.
There's a lot behind the pizzas. I mean,
of course there was.
There's
It's
a
a
peace
swag move.
offering and there's a big middle finger too.
Of course, of course. But
sometimes you need that to move on, right?
I
Sometimes
needed right. It was closure for me.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I look back at that time and I go, wow, that was like such a pause in my life because I didn't know what was going to happen. And now here we are, 2020. And like the whole world had a pause in their life right back in March when this whole COVID thing started. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of people are now where I was going, what am I going to do? What's next?
But that's where we all have our superpower. And that superpower is to make decisions in your life.
Right.
To make choices. I mean, that's where the power comes from. Because we all have the power to make those choices. So while we're all dealing with the same crap, you know, we're all dealing with COVID and we're all dealing with, you know, educating your kids or,
job stresses, whatever.
Right? Yeah. And do you wear a mask? Do you not wear a mask? Are you going to travel? Are you not going to travel? Like all of these things, we're all dealing with the same circumstances. It's just a matter of what do you choose to do with them? How do you choose to think about them?
Right.
And that's where it's amazing how we're all experiencing the same thing, but handling it differently.
So differently. Would you have ever thought the thing that was going to destroy the economy, the thing that was going to stop the world from spinning was going to be a global pandemic? Like, would you have ever said 2020 is going to be the year that the shit just falls apart? Like,
it's sort of this weird culmination to me of that, Spanky. You have but it's like pandemic meets social media meets this sort of almost coming apart as Americans because we have these echo chambers that we live in. And we stay in those echo chambers because it's so easy to find your echo chamber now. So if you're on Twitter, you just find you follow everybody who agrees with you.
Right.
You're on Facebook, you do the same thing. So it's like this weird, and now we have the racial component to go with it, which I don't necessarily want to weigh into, but it's all there. Like it's like a Molotov cocktail that's lit, and we're ready to throw it. The question is, are we going to put it out, or are we going to continue to actually throw it at an object?
You know, it's interesting. I am finding so the last few days I've had to pull myself back from consuming media, and I found myself getting sucked into the stories and really sucked into the drama of it, and I realized that it's an unhealthy place for me to be, really unhealthy, because I get worked up, and then I'm like, I need a glass of wine. I need because I literally was so worked up over what was going on in the news that I okay, no, this isn't healthy for me, because I like to stay in a lane of positive growth. And some people say, well, then you're living in
your own bubble.
Your own bubble.
Yeah. Unrealistic bubble.
Right.
I like my bubble.
I like my bubble too.
I'm sorry. I like my bubble.
Mm-hmm.
I like it too, because
I've been out of my bubble for most of my life. I just
you just found a bubble.
I just got in a bubble, and it's toasty and it's warm
and it's safe,
and I don't want to leave it right now.
But it's interesting to me that I as I look at the world today, it seems like everyone is in it. You seek things to validate your opinion. And so people on the left seek things that validate their opinion. People on the right seek things that and there's no middle ground anymore. Like people just can't hug it out and have a drink and have a conversation. Right. Everything is black and white. And whatever happened to the gray in the middle? And I feel like that's what's driving such a wedge in the world right now, is that everyone's so stuck on their opinion and their being right that no one's able to hear anyone else. And I think that's prevalent in every issue, whether it's COVID and masks, not wearing masks, whether it's bad cop, good cop, black, white. Everybody's taking a hard stance, and no one's willing to hear.
And is that a product of the social media world? Because that encourages not to sit down, especially in COVID, 3 people, talk it out. And, that also lends more emotionality to it. So if you're on social media all the time, you're watching news all the time, you're going to be super emotional about things. And that might make you incapable of sitting down and being calm, because you might get too emotional because you're so attached, so involved, you're in that bubble.
Right.
That is a super huge challenge that we as human beings have to figure out how to overcome as well.
I mean, the other challenge, too, is, just go back 20 years. If you had a thought on something, or you disagreed with someone, you would talk to your neighbor about it, or your spouse, or your friend. Now we've got news 24/7 coming at us from every which direction, and if there's something we don't like, we just comment, hit send, and it goes off into the ether. And what I think a lot of people don't understand is there's somebody on the other side reading those.
Right.
And they have an impact. And it becomes super easy just to send off a missive to someone and not understand the impact of the person receiving that. Now, if you're constructive and you just disagree, cool. We're allowed to have disagreements, but people have just become assholes.
Yeah.
And that's where, I don't have patience for it. And it's become super easy to be an asshole.
Right.
It used to be like, oh, that person, yep, he's an asshole, and everybody knew who the asshole was. Now it's like, everyone's an asshole. And we all have the ability to be that at any given moment. It's just a matter of who exercises the restraint and who doesn't, who allows their emotions, as you were talking about, Rob, get the best of them because they feel like this is going to bring some sort of relief in an environment where they feel like they've had no control.
Rob, to your point, I think social media has actually amplified the divide. And I'll give you a perfect example of that. In the community we live in, there's a private Facebook group for the community. Now, that community is massive, okay? Thousands of residents, thousands of homes. And I saw someone post, my neighbor's orange tree is hanging over my wall, and I'm worried about getting roof rats because da-da-da-da. What should I do? They posted this.
Neighbor.
Right. But instead of having that conversation, and they even took pictures of it, instead of having that conversation with the neighbor, they post it on social asking for people to, well, I would go cut the branches off, or I would do
Passive aggressive.
Right. Like, how about you just ring the doorbell? Hey.
There's fear.
For what? Talking to your neighbor?
Yeah. I mean...
I talk to all of my neighbors.
Okay, but you're running it through the filter of Spanky.
Okay.
You know, there is genuine fear for folks out there to create any kind of confrontation or uncomfortable situation. They create all these stories in their mind. Well, what if? What if I knock on the door and they tell me no? What am I going to do then?
Then you chop the branches down.
Right.
You know what I mean? But there is this fear of, like, I don't want confrontation. The fear of confrontation is so ripe that people don't have the confidence in knowing how to handle it because they run from it their entire lives. They post about it on Nextdoor because they don't want to. I don't have confidence in handling this.
Do you know what the number one thing people post in that Facebook group? Did anyone else hear those gunshots last night? It's a fucking car that backfired. We live in Gilbert, Arizona, one of the safest cities in America, and you're posting about fucking gunshots. It's a car backfiring, or a firework.
But you know, when you look for the negative, you find it.
Right.
So when you talk about, and you and I have had these conversations because I'm in a very different headspace right now.
Yeah.
If we were having this conversation a year ago, these words would not be falling out of my mouth. But it was one of those things where, like, I wouldn't engage in social. I had a boss that once told me, you are the least socially active person in this building. Now, that's like a kiss of death for somebody in media.
Right.
And the reason why I wasn't engaging with my audience is because some of them were assholes.
Right.
And, you know, they weren't constructive in their feedback or their criticism, which I can take and debate you 6 ways from Sunday on that. That's cool. You don't have to agree with me, and I don't expect everybody to. But when you're just a dick about it, like, I shut down. And why would I subject myself to that? You know, it's creating unnecessary angst. So I just disengaged entirely. And you and I would have these conversations where I just didn't feel like social was a safe place.
Right.
It wasn't a space that I wanted to live in. And you would say, well, it's where everybody lives right now. It doesn't have to be that way, Pamela, but that was my world. And what I've since grown to realize is you find what you're looking for. And in that period of time in my life, I would say, you know, this is negative, social's negative, people are negative, news is negative, life is negative, and guess what I was finding?
Negative.
People were negative, life was negative, social was negative, news was negative. You find what you look for. So, yes, social media can be extremely divisive and dividing. And we're seeing that right now in the polarization in this country on so many different levels. But, like, I sat down this week, and it was super striking to me because I had a really raw and long conversation with my 10-year-old daughter about race. And when I started asking her some questions, I realized that, you know, I could do a better job as a mom explaining these things to her. And we sat down, and there was a video that a news organization had put together about kind of like how did we get to this point where people are protesting and rioting and looting and marching and, you know, whatever. And that it wasn't just George Floyd. It started with Trayvon Martin. Okay,
Right.
I mean, it started a long time ago. Don't get me wrong, but like when you're looking at the social aspect and the social media and dealing with these things, and this news organization went through like Trayvon Martin and Philando Castile and Sandra Bland and Eric Gardner and all of these folks, and it was the videos and the 911 calls and what happened to the officers or didn't, and I was uncomfortable for a moment, but I showed that to my daughter. And I made her close her eyes a couple times because there were certain videos that, like, you can't unsee, and a 10-year-old doesn't need to see that. And I didn't want to scare the hell out of her, but, you know, at 10, almost 11, she needed to realize that life isn't as safe and as, like, rainbows and unicorns as it appears to be in Gilbert, Arizona. And afterwards, though, you know, we had a conversation about that, but I also gathered several videos from Twitter of folks at Fashion Square cleaning up, the community coming out and sweeping up the glass from Nordstrom's
after the riots.
The looting and the riots. I found the video of I think it was Genesee County sheriff who, told protesters, I don't want to have a protest, I want to have a parade. He took off his helmet, put down his baton, and walked with the people. There was another image of a police officer who had been separated from his squad, I guess you could say, and had his back up against a fence. And there's this huge protest going on in front, and there was a group of black men that formed like a half circle around him, their backs to him, kind of like we're protecting him, leave him alone. And the officer was isolated. And I showed those all to Riley as in you've been listening to mom and dad talk about this. Yeah, she has seen more news this week than she probably has in her lifetime. And these are important that you know these things. But I kind of took a page out of Mr. Rogers' book when he'd say, my mom told me, look for the helpers in the world. Right. And so we acknowledged what was happening. I wanted to educate her as best as I could as a white woman who's never experienced this before, but give her some perspective on what's happening and why this is going on, and then look for the good in the world. I think what's happening too often is people are just looking at the bad.
Right.
And if that's all you're looking for, then that's all you're ever going to find.
It's interesting. This whole so I want to touch on the George Floyd thing just for a couple of minutes. One of the divisions I'm seeing online and across the country are people saying, not all cops are bad cops. You guys, a day without cops and see what happens. And all the police supporters, I have friends that are cops, and all the police supporters are so fanatical about it. And then all the other people are going, yeah, but there are bad cops. There are bad cops. And your job as a police officer isn't just to police the people, it's to police each other. And when bad cops do bad things, it's just like the video that came out yesterday of a protester. He was an older white gentleman who got pushed down.
Horrible.
And he hit his head on the concrete. He started to bleed. He's okay. But the police report said he tripped. But 10 other police officers saw what happened, and everyone ignored it.
The whole world did now.
And now the whole world did. So how much of that's going on that's not being captured? And that bothers me. So when cops start to shout, but yes, we're here to protect and serve, and what about us? And yeah, we get it. Not every cop is bad. I have friends that are cops, and not every cop is bad. There are good cops, and there are bad cops. Just like there are good people, and there are bad people, right? It doesn't matter what your job is, who you are. There's good and there's bad. And sometimes you got to go, wait a second, that's wrong.
You've got to have some nuance.
Right. There's nuance to
life
every
is
situation.
nuance, but we just can't, for some reason, we have to be in a camp. Because part of it is we have a hero complex in this country.
We do. Totally.
It even happened with COVID. Everybody from grocery store employees, everybody's a hero or frontline worker. It's like, okay, let's relax on the hero talk here. Right. Everybody can't be a hero, because if everybody's a hero, no one's a hero.
Correct. Frontline workers to me are cops, EMS, firefighters, hospital people. Grocery store? Now, for me, that was a stretch. I'm with you on that. But I'll give it to them because they showed up.
Sure.
When a lot of people were afraid. And,
that makes you brave, doesn't make you a hero.
It doesn't make you a hero.
A hero is, I'm walking down the street, there's a building on fire, I run in, grab the kid.
That's a hero.
That's a heroic act.
Correct.
So, and that's very interesting too. In fact, the talk show host we used to work with introduced this in my mind. He says, if you're getting paid to do something, you sign up for a job, you know that this is the job, you have to go above and beyond to be a hero.
Right.
But we've just blanketed everybody. And if saying this out loud, it seems like it's a bad thing to say. It seems like people are going to say, what do you mean? I'm just being honest. Like, we have a hero complex.
Right. Heroism doesn't start at $30,000 a year with benefits.
No.
Heroism starts at above and beyond.
And it's rare. Right. It's super rare. It's, the cop who does run in the burning building, or who runs in the middle of the street and saves a kid from getting hit by a car, or pushes a kid out of the way and he gets hit by a car, she gets hit by a car. That's what being a hero is, not just simply going to work. Like, we can't separate the two. And part of it's because we adore that they're protecting the community, which is fantastic. But again, there has to be and can be a separation between that and being a hero.
Right.
Just because you show up doesn't mean you're a hero.
They're doing their job. What they're paid to do.
Yeah, and that's what I thought was so interesting about, and again, this will be a bit controversial to some, but it is what it is. like nurses and doctors, this is what you do. Like, this is your job. Your job is to go treat people who are sick,
right?
No matter the sickness. That's
the
why
Hippocratic
you signed
oath
up. Exactly
is right. Doctors take that.
But the doctors I see a little different because doctors signed up to save lives. Doctors didn't sign up to put their own lives on the line.
Well, and that's a different story.
And that's how this has changed.
Sure. And if you worked for, 5 days straight, 18 hours a day, different story. But if you're looking for credit, that's the other problem is, if you're starting to look for credit and starting to want to be called a hero, you lose it for me. Again, just being raw and honest with you. Like, the heroes are the ones who don't talk about it. They're the military veterans who, they don't tell you they're a veteran.
Right.
They just are. They're not looking for credit. They're not looking for accolades. Heroes don't look for accolades, in my view. Again, that's just my view. Doesn't mean you have to agree with me. We can disagree even on what a hero is, and that's totally cool. But we should be able to have this conversation.
I think I'm 99% in your camp on that. I think a lot of people want heroes, though.
Absolutely.
I think everyone's looking for heroism because it makes them feel good. It's like that's why people love seeing the Marvel movies, right? Everybody wants a hero.
Because we live in the negative space that Pamela and you were talking about, Spanky. So we need the good.
We need something to balance that. So
we see so many villains out there.
Right.
I mean, the opposite of a hero is a villain. And there is a lot of villains out there. And I don't think, as much as people love heroes, the things that they despise most is when a villain gets away. Or when a villain wins and gets a happy ending.
Right.
The heroes are supposed to get the happy endings, not the villains.
Right.
And so when you see the villain getting an edge or winning, or
you're like, damn.
Yeah, and it becomes, tribal. It becomes animalistic in that sense. And it's trying to take back control over something you feel you have no control over.
Okay, which brings me to the next thing that's really heavy for me. The George Floyd thing, it's going to take decades and centuries for this world to heal and for racism to end. We all have our part.
Wait. Well, let me just interject here for a second, because we've all been in the news business for decades, and this is my cynicism showing right now, because I've covered protests after I don't know how many black men have been murdered. I've covered marches after I don't know how many students have been shot and killed. And I always have held the stance of like, okay, this is it. This is going to change things. And I've always been proven wrong.
Yeah.
So I want to ask you two, is what we're seeing with the George Floyd situation, is it different?
I don't think it's different. I think it's now amplified because of social media, and that is where I think there's value in social media in this particular instance. So it's divisive is it divisive or divisive? Which is the right?
Depends if you're British or American.
Okay, divisive.
Whatever you want. Yeah.
Now you're British.
Missile.
It's a divisive
missile.
Where it's divisive or divisive. Now I'm going to be stuck on that. Is that
you're a hero in my book for trying to explore the difference between the word.
There is a camp that is firmly entrenched in Black Lives Matter, and then there's a camp that's firmly entrenched in All Lives Matter. And I saw somebody post something that really resonated with me, and it was somebody was responding to Black Lives Matter with All Lives Matter. And the person wrote, and I'm going to butcher it, but it was pretty eloquent. So my butchery of their eloquent words is going to just totally destroy it. But it was saying all lives matter is like saying every house matters when only my house is on fire. Is your house on fire? Right? You want the firemen to focus on your house, not every house. Right now, Black lives matter. Do all lives matter globally? Absolutely.
But saying one particular doesn't mean it's not. We get so defensive about it.
We get so right. Like, we take no. All lives matter. I'm white. My life matters. Yeah. No,
of course it matters.
Your life matters. But guess what? You're not the one who's having your neck crushed. You're not the one who's getting shot because you're black. You're not the one. I have a nephew who is biracial, who is 14 years old, and he's afraid to go out and play with his friends because he's 6'1" and black.
Mm-hmm.
Like that there's a problem. There's a problem. And so which led me to where I was going.
Does this change anything, though?
I think what it does is it raises awareness to a level that most people didn't have. I think Betty Crocker Middle America, white Middle America, wasn't really seeing this. Or if they were doing I don't see this, I don't see this, I don't see this, it's not me. And I think now it's becoming really apparent, and I think that's a good thing. You know, Gary Vee said something the other day that he's like, film everything. Because until we can suffocate racism, this democratizes the world. Mm-hmm. Because people can't get away with shit.
Now, the flip side, though, the danger, and I've already seen this.
Go ahead.
Is the number of, I'll just call them white folks, influencers, whatever, who are showing up to show up. It has to be genuine.
Yes.
And all of a sudden, so I'm not going to pat myself on the back, but I'm going to say I was woke before woke was a thing.
Okay.
Because I've been involved in black culture for years.
You are hip hop culture. I get it.
Yeah, but I wanted to understand it since I was a kid. I don't know why. It's just a thing for me. I love it. And I think it's because of how I read history. And certain books from black authors opened my eyes to things, and I was like, wow, this is some bullshit.
Right.
So I stayed in that sort of mindset. And again, not to pat myself on the back, but because I'm certainly not an expert in it, and I never will be. I'll never understand. But I've had enough conversations with enough people that have told me that their experience in America is different than mine. So I'm like, oh, crap. That's what we, at least as white folk, have to understand. That, you know, just because we have white, the best thing I saw about white privilege was a post my friend James shared. It says, white privilege doesn't mean we don't think your life is hard. It just means your skin isn't a barrier to that.
Right.
So poverty, whatever, because everybody has to come up with, well, I was poor, I was this. It's like, that's not the point. That's not what it means. It's a whole different element. We just have to at least come up with that. And the amount of people that have tried, white people who have woken up in the last 3 weeks and have tried to lecture me, I'm like, sorry, y'all need to go to school a little bit. And that's another problem with the social aspect of it we have to be careful of is everybody gets high and mighty all of a sudden.
Right.
And this isn't going to be an all of a sudden high and mighty for 3 weeks.
No, this is
going to be for the rest of our lives.
Right.
That we have to be aware of this in order for it to change. And so as much as I like Gary Vee and filming everything, the other part could be we could get exhausted if everything is filmed where we stop paying attention. So too much is not necessarily a good thing. We have to find that right amount where we're paying attention and keeping it in our conscious thoughts. So we have to keep on the right path.
Do we need to police the world? Like, do we as citizens, are we responsible for policing everyone else? Are we responsible for what? Does that feel like Handmaid's Tale when we're suddenly policing one another?
It's weird.
Yeah. You know, it's very philosophical. Mm-hmm. I mean, I can't control another human being. I honestly do not have the power. We all think we have the power.
Right.
We all try all the time to control other people. When they don't do what we want them to do, we get mad at them. Well, they were never going to do what you wanted them to do.
Right.
Your idea that they were going to do what you wanted them to do was only in your mind, not in theirs. So you have no control over another human being. So am I responsible for their actions? Hell no, I'm not responsible for their actions. I'm only responsible for my own. So in that regard, I am a person, if I see something that is wrong to me, because I only have control over myself, then I will act. But see, that is where my responsibility lies.
And isn't that where we should talk about heroes? Heroes are people that are willing to change things, go above and beyond. So, for example, in the George Floyd situation, had one of those cops push that cop off his neck, we would not call him a hero, but that is actually the heroic act.
Correct.
The good cop who calls out the bad cop, the Pamela who sees something wrong and does something and says something about it, that's where the heroism comes in. And we all have it within us.
Right. We have to step out of our comfort zone, though, to go, this is an injustice, this isn't right. Mm-hmm. You know, the fact that nobody rushed over to the older gentleman who was bleeding on the sidewalk after he got pushed by the cop, that bothered me as much as seeing the George Floyd video. And what I'm seeing is anger, hostility, hatred, but I'm seeing people turn their backs. And I don't understand why people are turning their backs. We're all turning our backs on one another instead of
comfort,
putting our arms around one another.
Mm-hmm. But it's like, uncomfortable.
Yeah, but you know what? For us to grow and for this world to change, don't we have to...
There are people who are putting their arms around.
I'm not saying
there
everyone.
There are people that are growing, and again, it kind of goes back to the narrative right now is the world is going to hell in a handbasket,
Yeah.
and so we're all finding so much evidence to support that because there's so much out there to support it. But it's where do you choose to focus your attention?
Right.
Because wherever you focus, that's what you're going to find. So I'm not trying to be like, rainbows and sunshine here, but there is a reality of, you create what you're looking for. And so you taking a step away from the news this week and having that awareness that it wasn't really serving you is good. And that doesn't mean you're putting on the blinders. That doesn't mean you're ignorant to what's going on in this world. It just means that for you at this moment, it was too much and you had to take a step away from it.
Right.
And I know that might be controversial for other people out there, like, well, you know what, the black community can't step away from it. This is what they're... And that's fine. Both can be true.
Right, they can exist together.
And that's what is frustrating to me is Black Lives Matter. Yes. All lives matter. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Why does one have to be mutually exclusive?
Right.
This is not an all or nothing type of situation. With COVID, you could be concerned about it. You could think it was overblown. You could think that,
We didn't react fast enough.
right.
There's a whole bunch of things that could exist.
And that doesn't mean that any one of those thoughts puts you into a certain camp.
Right.
It just means that, you're trying to become educated. And that's where education takes time. It takes effort. Mm-hmm. Reaction takes no thought whatsoever.
Right.
And so we've become a very reactive society and less of an educated society. Racism, you know what? It's been here. It's not going away anytime soon,
Right.
despite what we're seeing right now in society. How you change that is through education, is through learning, so that the next time you find yourself in a situation, you don't turn a blind eye to it. Just because you've done it your entire life and were unaware that this was going on, don't beat yourself up about that. You can't change that.
Right.
What you can change is how you learn from that and what you choose to do moving forward. The challenge with that is so many people will beat themselves up because they were unaware or they didn't know. Or when somebody else beats them up for it, that becomes their identity. Instead of choosing to focus on, yeah, I didn't know then, but I'm choosing to learn now.
Pamela, the analogy that I use for things like this is driving while looking only in your rearview mirror. If you drive and you only look in your rearview mirror, you're going to see everything that's behind you, but you're not going to see the tree you're about to hit. And people are spending so much time in that space looking back going, oh, I made this mistake. I feel so guilty. I should have known. No. Forget that narrative. Shut the bullshit off in your head.
Yes.
And focus on what's in front of us.
But you have to know that that thought was even there.
Right.
If you are unaware that these things were even happening, if you're unaware that that thought of, I got to cross the street
Yeah.
at night because it's just me and a black man and that scares me, so I'm going to cross the street. If you're unaware that that thought is even in your mind, you can't change it.
Right.
So there becomes an awareness that has to be created within ourselves first before lasting change can take place.
100%. So I stopped
Love
myself and we went into the George Floyd conversation a little more than I think Pamela even wanted to go into.
But I think this is good. I mean, this is what we have to do as people, right?
Absolutely.
We have to have these.
So I want to take 30 seconds. No, it's going to go longer than this, but I'm going to try.
Whoopsie.
I want to go.
Handsy.
Yeah, I know he's
Three
very
long-winded. Back up, buddy.
I want to talk a little bit about the left and the right and the divisiveness between.
It's like I got out of this.
Oh, my
No,
Lord.
Pamela. But this is
Shit.
This is not going to be what you're used to. So let me just start. We've already talked about how social has really created these walled gardens of you're on this side, you're on that side. Mm-hmm. I find it interesting observing when I'm not participating. So as a business owner, it's detrimental to my business to have a political opinion online. Detrimental. Are there times where I want to say stuff? Oh my God, yes. Are there times where I wish I just want to scream at people? Yes, absolutely. But I don't. I make that choice because what happens in the business world is if you support this party because of something you say, that means you don't like them and you've alienated half of your potential customers. If you support them, you don't like these people and you alienate half of your customers. So you're fucked no matter what you choose. There's no winning. I am seeing behavior from both sides that I find appalling. Just because I am a fiscal conservative and social liberal, anyone in the Conservative Party sees me as a liberal. Just because I'm a fiscal conservative, the people on the left see me as you're a right, you support big business, right? You can't live in the middle. And it's so sad to me that...
Why can't you live in the middle?
Okay, I can live in the middle and I choose to live in the middle. But people don't act like there's a middle anymore. The behavior that I'm seeing online is you're either here or you're either here, and this is the DMZ. Nobody goes here. And there's no...
Sounds to me like you need to clean up your social media feed.
But also, think about the DMZ. What does the DMZ prevent? War.
Right.
So there needs to be a DMZ.
But I think
there needs to be more of us in the DMZ because you have North Korea and South Korea or U.S. and U.S. or whatever.
Right.
You need people in the DMZ to prevent that because societies only exist if they get along, right, left, indifferent.
Why has conservatism and liberalism, why have these two things become so hostile toward one another? When, by the way, if you look up the word liberalism and liberal, the definition of liberal is nothing even close to what the conservatives are saying it is. And conservatism is nothing like what the liberals are saying it is. I feel like we've been hijacked by give it all away and here's your Bible. Mm-hmm. And if you don't do it my way because the Bible says so, whatever happened to church and state separation?
But it's a political Bible.
Right? It is a political Bible. Mm-hmm. It's a football, and it's a nuclear football. Mm-hmm. And we're just throwing it back and forth at one another.
Hoping it doesn't explode.
What's happened to our society that it has devolved to this point? And I think it is a devolution. Is that a new word?
Yeah.
Okay, it's a devolution. It's a devolving evolution. What's caused this? Because it's not social media that's driven this.
It's a big part. A 24-hour news cycle.
Okay.
All of us having been in the news.
Let's back up and explain.
Bent on ratings and fear and emotions.
So, like, when COVID first broke out, right, where it became real for us. I mean, I was even on the air when, the first case in Arizona was...
Seems like forever ago.
I know, right? Holy cow. It does feel like forever ago. And nobody could have forecasted what was about to happen.
Right.
I get out of the news game. I had a blissful 3 weeks, okay, where I took every news app off of my phone.
Yeah.
I took notifications from all different services off. I unsubscribed to all these newsletters, and it was freaking awesome. That's where the bubble started to get created, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
I was in Durango, Colorado, with my family on a snowboarding trip. And COVID really started ratcheting up. And I only knew that because my husband was so pretty plugged in. And I started reading a little bit more. And we came back on on Monday. He was supposed to leave for another ski trip on Wednesday. He decided not to go. Thursday, NBA closed by Friday. This was your first week as a talk show host. By Friday, Disney World was closed, and then by Monday, I think
the world
we were closed.
The world shut down.
And in that time, I started really consuming a lot of news again, and that familiar feeling of anxiety and unease came back. But since I was able to push the pause button for a brief moment in time, I was able to tune into okay, this isn't normal.
Right.
It was normal for me for years, but I was able to take a bit of a break and then go, okay, no, this isn't normal. This isn't supposed to be there. And I started, wanting to be informed, but not getting wrapped up in it. Because you could start to already see the divides taking place. Initially, it was we're all in this together, right? It takes a village. We're all in this together.
And we're the village people.
now we've gotten to the point where if you wear a mask, it means you're this, and if you don't wear a mask, it means you're that. Like how far we've come in such a short period of time, or devolved, or de-evolution, or whatever the word is you came up with. But even my husband was like, I don't know who to believe.
Right.
Exactly.
There's so much mixed information out there. And I mean, like, that's a challenge for us as news people. You can only imagine what it's like for the average Joe. So the feedback, like, I gave my husband, and I even went on social and gave this feedback as well, was, stay away from the opinion pieces online. No offense, Rob. I know you're still in, like, the opinion radio, and that's where I've lived my entire life. But find the facts.
Right.
And then it became, well, where do you find the facts? Well, it's not on CNN, Fox, or MSNBC, let me tell you that much. As a news person, we know the network news, the ABC, the CBS, the NBC, they try to go as middle of the road as possible. Of course, there's leanings, okay? But they're a heck of a lot in the middle of the road than CNN, MSNBC, or Fox. You want to take that a step further? Go Reuters. Go AP. Okay? That's where you find the facts to be informed. Now, be open to the fact it's going to change. I think people get...
Especially with science.
Yeah. People get hung up, especially with COVID, that like, well, Fauci said back in March that we don't need to wear masks. Well, we've learned more.
Right.
Okay? And that's why it's called practicing medicine. You can have a diagnosis where doctors come in and say, okay, check. This is what you have. And for the most part, they all agree on the diagnosis. You get a bunch of doctors in the room on how to treat that diagnosis, you're going to get umpteen million different opinions. But what happens is people try to find the doctor or the person that agrees the confirmation bias of what they already believe. And they're not open to other possibilities. So they become very narrow-minded.
And there's a million doctors now because everybody has YouTube.
Yep.
And that's one of the other parts that's really challenging.
And that is where it has changed.
Right.
That is where it has changed. We have so much information at our fingertips, which is a huge blessing. I learned how to change the string in my weed whacker because of all the information on
Yet
YouTube.
you still call me for tech support with your...
I've gotten better.
You've gotten better.
It's only when I really booger things up that, like, you're like, oh, geez. Yeah, it's never good when you call the Apple genius after this guy doesn't know what he's doing, and the Apple genius says, after 10 years, I've never...
Like there are very few things I can't help you with, and that one
I find them.
Well, good, yeah, I know
like
you
a doctor.
do.
Testing.
It's like when you go to a doctor and the doctor's like, whoa.
You're like one of those mystery shoppers.
No good can come of
Okay.
that. But that's what's changed, is we have so much information at our fingertips.
Yeah.
And with that, we have so much good information at our fingertips. And with that, we have so much bad information at our fingertips. And people don't take the time to be educated. They skim.
Yeah, they headline read.
And so, or somebody says something,
and then react to
they
those.
believe it, and it becomes truth.
I watched that the other day, and I see this happening, and I'm really working with friends and family members who are headline readers who will send me something because they know I'm not watching the news. So they're like, well, you need to stay informed. Here, I'm going to send this to you. I don't need you to send me shit. I go to AP and Reuters. If I want to get information, that's where I'll go. And I got something was sent to me, and it was about police arrest an FBI agent. And it was a black man being handcuffed, and he was shouting profanities. And I'm like, you know that's not real. He's not an FBI agent. Yeah, no, do some research. Before you send something, do some fact checking. And I think a lot of people don't fact check because that's not their natural tendency. Whereas mine is, before I share something, I want to know that this is legit. And I knew that wasn't legit. People don't fact check because they're not from the news business. You've got to fact check. Facts matter a lot.
But you also have to look at generational as well. You look at, like, my parents, for instance. Like, if it was in the newspaper, it was real.
Right.
You know what? If I could read it, it happened.
And my daughters, if it's on TikTok, it's real.
I don't get this.
It's a great example, though.
It's true.
And what? Two people, as
Dad,
Joe Rogan would say.
Did
like,
you see that Donald Trump is invading Russia? What?
Look.
It was on TikTok.
I thought TikTok was just stupid dance videos, no?
No.
Oh, okay.
It's a great tool.
By the way, tell everybody to delete it. Chinese government is spying on everybody because they actually created it. Actually, the DoD, Defense Department, told employees, do not download TikTok. Do not do it. Don't put it on your phone because it gives access to everything on your phone.
By the way, Google knows everything about us already. So, and Amazon.
And they're going to try to help a president in 2020 win.
Exactly.
Biden.
Exactly.
It's kind of scary, quite honestly. And whether you like Trump or not, the fact that you have a company that knows every single thing about 90% of us,
it's pretty
knows
amazing.
how to sway, could help sway an election.
For sure.
Super dangerous.
All right, so let's go to.
That's my conspiracy.
I was going
I know,
to.
like I got to change the tinfoil. So
I was going to save this for closing notes, but I want to talk about it now because you just set it up so perfectly. I want bold predictions for the remainder of the year. And the reason I want bold predictions, and it doesn't have to be bold, it just has to be your predictions. I like bold predictions. I have a bold prediction that I'll share. I want to go last because mine is the craziest of the bold predictions.
why does that not surprise me?
Okay. I already know that mine's the craziest of the bold. I have shared this with like a handful of close people. I don't know that I've shared it with you, nor you. But
No, I haven't got any Spanky predictions.
Okay,
and
so
prognostications.
So I want to go to bold predictions for the remainder of the year. We are recording this, filming this in June of 2020. Get us from here to January when the president gets
I got to stretch.
sworn in again.
Oh yeah, okay. You want to go?
Inauguration day. Between now and inauguration day.
Between now and inauguration.
What's going to happen
6
to
months.
this world?
What's going to happen in 6 months? This is tough because in my 20 plus years of covering news, talking about news, this, going back in history, feels like the 60s without a war. Then it was Vietnam, but there was Vietnam, there was race on top of Vietnam, there was presidential elections, LBJ was not popular, didn't run for re-election, Nixon had already lost in 1960, no one really liked him anyways, but he ended up winning. So it's kind of a similar situation where Trump is like LBJ.
Right.
Where he's picking targets in Vietnam himself in the basement, walking out, doing the thing with the Bible in front of the church. And you got Joe Biden, who no one really likes, but might be the option that we have right now. But Trump has such a fantastical support base, he could still win. And it's crazy to even think about. So if I'm thinking politically, man, it's tough to say because I can see it going both ways. So let me leave that aside for a second.
Okay.
I think my gut tells me we're going to stay in this protest mode for a little while.
Okay.
It's going to fade out and then kick back up again around election time.
just like COVID.
Just like COVID.
Take a break and then kick back up again.
Yep. And then whoever we elect, it's if we elect one particular person, if we elect Joe Biden, magically it will all disappear. Because everybody will think, oh, we have an option. It won't be an option. So my magic prediction is this. There's going to be a lot of changes in the outside world, but not much is going to change in America as far as coming together.
Okay.
So that's my unbold, boring prediction.
No. But I mean, like, that's where you're at right now.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And that's what you're dealing with. And so it's what you're going to see again in the future.
And let me just jump in, because I read an interview from James Baldwin, who is one of, I think, the smartest people ever to have lived. The author. He did an interview in 1967 with
It's funny,
Esquire.
you said James Baldwin, and I have a picture of Alec Baldwin in my head.
Yeah.
Two different people.
I know, but when I'm like, Saturday Night Live guy, right?
No, he was just an author.
Right, but you said that, and that's what stuck in my head.
His first work was Notes of a Native Son, came out in 1955.
Okay.
And it's just, he was a black man born in Harlem, moved to France because it was too racist for him, America, so he left, and he came back, and so there was all these riots going on in 67, 68, and he was talking about the riots. And what he was saying still applies today in 2020. So that's why that is in my head. That's why I'm like, oh, look, we've already done this before, and not a whole lot changed. In fact, a lot of things have gotten worse, because if you want to get into Rob Hunter's, libertarian theories about the Fourth Amendment, which is the right to be protecting from yourself against the government on reasonable searches and seizures, that's out the window. We talk about the First Amendment, Second Amendment all the time. We never talk about the Fourth Amendment. But that erosion has allowed this sort of, I'll call it a police state, which has allowed racist police policies to continue. So that being said, that is the problem. If we do not address the Fourth Amendment problem, we are never going to change the policing policies in this country. And now we're talking about literally defunding police departments. Like, that's just not going to happen.
It's ludicrous.
It is. It is. So that's why, based on history and having that fresh in my head, we'll talk a lot, but we won't actually take a lot of action.
That's why I asked, does anything change?
Yeah. So I didn't mean to interrupt you, Pam.
No.
You spurred a thought.
I like that.
So what's your bold prediction?
You know, I take it from a very different perspective right now. You talk political, you talk, the world and society. I think what we're going to see this year is, as negative and hard and harsh the first half is, because of that, people are going to start coming through the other side in a more positive manner. And I'm talking about a personal way. I have no control over the political world. I have no control over society. I have no control over who becomes the next president of the United States besides what I vote. I have no control over the protests except, saying my piece. But I have all this control over myself. And I think what people are starting to realize is that they need to take control. There are so many people that are without a job because they've been going through life on the default setting.
Yeah.
You go to school, you get a college degree, you get a job, you get married, you buy the house, you have kids, and you live the same year over and over again and call that a life. You die at 40, but they put you in the ground at 80. I think what you're starting to see right now is people realizing, I am the creator of my future. And that job that I had given my blood, sweat, and tears to, that had to lay me off, that furloughed me, that I'm struggling to feed my family. Like, why am I relying on somebody else for what I can take care of on my own? So I think what you're going to see is an amazing explosion of small businesses and entrepreneurship and people deciding to take care of themselves in that regard instead of having somebody else take care of them. And I'm not talking from like a governmental standpoint.
Right.
I'm talking about from an employment standpoint and waking up to the idea that they are in control and that they have been on the default setting and that they have just been kind of aimlessly going through life.
Like a zombie.
You've got to experience something that is uncomfortable, that jolts you, that is painful in order to create change. And
not just in you, but everywhere.
Exactly. But with COVID and how it impacted employment and how it impacted marriages and how it impacted relationships and how it impacted every facet of our lives, people were left with their thoughts. And sometimes that can be a very dangerous place.
Yeah.
And other times that can be a very freeing place. So I see like that 2020, I don't want to push pause. I don't want to hit reset. I want to see what we come out as on the other side, because I think you may be surprised by what people can do.
I agree. I think what we're going through right now is actually incredibly beneficial to society as a whole. It looks ugly, it feels ugly, it's uncomfortable, but the long-term benefits of the pain we're going through today will have a huge positive impact once we're beyond this. But that's not my bold prediction.
Can I, before you do it?
Please.
Just a quick question for you guys. How do we get people uncomfortable with being uncomfortable?
I think they have to find it themselves. They have to find the point where they're willing to have a little bit of pain, a little bit of hunger, a little bit of discomfort to grow. And everybody's tolerance is different. Everybody handles it different. I think it's individual. I think every person has, like Allison, my wife, has been for the last year and a half really stepping out of her comfort zone, like doing things that really surprise me. But she's watching some of the things that I do, and she's like, you know what? I got to do some of those things. I need to be uncomfortable. My default is putting myself into uncomfortable. That's what I do, and I do it almost daily. And I don't know why I do that. Maybe I'm just is it sadist that likes to hurt themselves?
Well, you've asked, is this like a what is it? Spelling test or like
I don't know.
Context clues. You know, it's like the third word you've asked us
53.
about.
I'm the fucking old guy in the room. Okay, I'm at a loss for words. So,
They ask Google.
My hair's grayer than yours, though.
well, you
Like,
have
super
more
gray.
hair than I do. So here's my bold prediction that I've shared with a handful of people.
Ooh.
And this is the first time I'm going to say it out loud where it's captured, recorded.
There's a hell of a build up to this. I'm excited.
Well, okay, no, because it's a little crazy.
President Spanky Moskowitz.
Not even close.
President Spanky. Question. President Spanky. How great would that be?
That would be awesome. No, but here's my prediction. I predict that there's such unrest right now in our country, both racial, political, economic. I feel that we are at a boiling point for an explosion. And so what I feel is going to happen, or my bold prediction is, that the election will come in November. Biden will win the election. President Trump will say that it's invalid because of voter fraud and will refuse to vacate the White House until it's proven otherwise, which is going to lead to civil war, which is going to lead... Now, you know me. You know I don't come up with these crazy extremist theories, but this is what's been... I'm watching this, kind of looking at everything, going... His supporters, his base, will rally with AKs to support him, just like they went to the Michigan State Capitol to show how powerful they are. And the rest of the country is going to be like, what the hell? And there's going to be military involvement, because I believe at this point, his ego has gotten the best of him. He's done some great things for this country, and he's also done some really shitty things for this country. And I think his ego has gotten the best of him. And I see this ending not well.
I could foresee that he fights, and even to the point where you would have certain states swear allegiance to President Trump, and then you'd have a President Biden, and California and Washington and Oregon and, you know, wherever. And it's states like Arizona, like, okay, what are we going to pick? Because we're kind of one of those states that's kind of in the middle.
We're a swing right now.
They're like, and who decides? Who gets to decide?
But
state legislature? This would be crazy.
Is that...
It's like a novel.
Do you think that's totally insane?
You know what? I think anything is possible.
I know. How crazy is that to even think?
And there had been many a times where I would be shocked by what was happening, and my former co-host would be like, "Really, you're shocked by this? Like, no, like this is just the way it is."
Yeah.
But,
He's a glass half full kind of guy.
But you know, it's one of those things where you can find a lot of evidence right now to support that theory.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. Or you can also take a look at what James Mattis has done this week.
Yeah.
And taking the unprecedented step of writing a pretty scathing op-ed after having kept his mouth shut all these years. Does that then give Republicans cover beyond the Lisa Murkowskis and, you know, Susan Collins or whomever it may be to step up and say something? Because here's the thing that I think we all forget. This could change quickly. And when I say change quickly, in my perception, not for the bad, but for the better. If you start having, I think it was Murkowski this week, who came out and said, something along the lines, Rob would know this better than me, about, you know, people may be comfortable to say things behind closed doors that they haven't been willing to say before. It's something that we've all known, that there are leaders in this country that have been silent too long.
Right.
And when
Which
you
means
start,
they're not leaders.
True, but we've elected them as
Correct.
our leaders.
Yes.
And when you start having true leaders, such as General Mattis, speak up and take the slings and arrows that may potentially come from the president, and then it emboldens others to come forward. And it doesn't take many. It doesn't take many. You start to chip away some of those, and the idea of where you think we're going, Spanky, immediately changes. Right. Immediately changes. Now, am I holding my breath that that's going to happen? No, I'm not. But I'm saying the possibility for true leadership to emerge in this country from some very unlikely characters is ripe.
I would love to see us go back to the days of the Reagan presidency, when Democrats and Republicans would go to the pub at the end of the day, have a beer together.
But where's the victory in that these days?
But they would figure stuff out for the betterment of the country.
It's not about the betterment of the country these days. It's about getting reelected.
Bingo.
I mean, unfortunately, like that's my cynicism, but it's true.
How do we
fix that?
We can't at this point, because the way you fix that is through, in my opinion, term limits. And you know how you get term limits? They have to vote them in, and they're not going to vote themselves out of a job.
So here's,
wow, I just went back to
because here you're exactly right. So the last approval rating I saw as we record this for Trump was 39%. So you're getting to that point where some Republicans are going to have to make decisions. The problem is the Republican Party is the party of Trump. Mm-hmm. And those Republicans are more interested in staying in power. That's why they're not saying anything. You notice who's speaking out, not even against Trump, about the issues that are going on,
Democrats.
about COVID, about, Democrats, only because they're attacking Trump. But Democrats are so focused on Trump, they're only attacking Trump. They're not trying to solve the problems and fix the problems because they're thinking the same thing. They need to get reelected, and they have a chance to gain complete power, which is House, Senate, and presidency.
Right.
That's all they're thinking about. So they're using the George Floyd aftermath, I want to call it that, to try to get themselves elected, which is just as despicable.
Yep.
And that's the problem. You have two despicable parties trying to out-despicable each other with no one standing up and saying, this is horrendous. Why are we doing this? Because they have become more important than the country.
Yeah. Does anybody have enough of a loud voice in Washington, D.C. to say enough? Is there...
Who would that be?
That's why I'm asking you.
Who
Is there anyone?
I mean, anybody who has done that. I mean, we have an example right here in Arizona with Senator Jeff Flake. Former Senator Jeff Flake.
Didn't even bother to run.
Because he couldn't get reelected.
Mm-hmm.
So what's the value in that? I get the altruistic, believe me. That was me for years on the radio.
Right.
Like, this is wrong. This is what it needs to be. And why aren't people doing this? When in all reality, it's every man for themselves.
It could be a senator. It'd have to be a senator who doesn't care about losing an election or is 4 years away and could take a stand and can, as long as they can withstand Trump coming after them, especially if they are a conservative, a true conservative, who could stand up and do it.
Third option, they have a terminal illness and haven't told anyone.
Yep.
Because their career is dead, no matter what.
Or they don't care about their career because they think this is something bigger. It's like a Mr. Smith Goes to Washington scenario where, it would take someone like that in a real form to do it. So who's going to be risky enough to do it? It could be a Democrat, could be a Republican. But the Democrat person would have to get out of the Democrat bubble. Republican would have to get out of the Republican and say, you know what? The country's more important than me. I don't care if I lose. I'll run again, see what happens. But this is wrong. Here's what's right. Here's how we should lead.
Okay, let's talk about economic recovery, and that'll be it. Economic recovery and mental health recovery. What's going to come first?
Economic.
How long is it going to take for the mental health recovery of America?
I wish I knew.
Well, I mean, the mental health of America has been on life support for a long time. Just look at what we have already created in this country. And, Stoneman Douglas, Sandy Hook, the Vegas shooting, the Texas church shooting. Why do those happen? Well, it's a lot of people that just don't know how to cope with their own emotions, don't know how to cope with the world that's going on around them. We don't know how to cope. And it's not necessarily just an American issue. It's a human issue. We don't know how to cope. At what point in time do your parents sit you down in life, at what age, and say, okay, here's how you handle your feelings, and here's how you cope with what happens in life that you don't like? Have your parents ever give you that conversation?
Nope.
Did your parents ever give you that conversation?
No.
Those conversations aren't taking place. What's cool, though...
I talk to my mom about them. I teach my mom about
you're helping your mom with it.
Exactly.
What I think is cool in this country, though, is that you're starting to see more discussion about it. During the whole COVID outbreak, that was a huge concern, and rightfully so.
Sure.
That people were talking about. We never used to talk about mental health. We never used to talk about, going to see a shrink, okay? Like, that was bad. But, like, so many people have now gone to see therapists and have gone to try to get help. That's a good thing.
Yeah.
It's going to take a hell of a long time to turn things around. But, once people realize that they are in control of what's happening inside and what's happening outside of them doesn't impact the inside, they get to choose that. That's where the freedom really comes.
Actually, it does affect the outside, because when you're happy here, it shows and other people become happy, and then we start to figure shit out together. I think people are so miserable right now with themselves that they project it on one another. And that misery loves company.
They're hurt. They're in pain.
Right. I think it's going to...
People in pain cause pain.
But here's what we never talk about. Happiness is ultimately the great equalizer, the thing that can make everybody equal. But we don't talk about happiness as if it's a choice. It's something to achieve. Like, that's the American dream. You're told that from the moment you're born. The American dream is the true path to happiness, and you can't be happy until you have the white picket fence and the family with the 2 kids and the dog running around in the yard, and you take a couple of vacations a year. The reality is you can turn happiness on as soon as you learn how to control your emotions, until you choose, okay, what am I thinking? Oh, I'm not good enough. Says who? Me. Okay. Right. Why do I say that? Just like Pamela was talking about. It's switching that thought around and just processing that thought instead of just believing. One of the most profound things I ever heard in the last 3 years, a woman named Mary Morrissey, I've told you both about.
Yep.
She said, comes on stage. I went to this personal development conference. She says, first thing she says, she's like, your thoughts are not your own. And I'm like, what the fuck is this woman talking about? She explained, you have a thought that comes in your head. Automatic negative thoughts is what some people call them. So it doesn't mean it's yours. Somebody may have told you that. Your brain's trying to keep you safe. There's all kinds of things that we don't discuss because we don't want to tell people our automatic negative thoughts that we're not good enough according to our own selves, or according to something you heard from your mother or your father or someone at school. You got embarrassed once, so you don't want to step outside the comfort zone. All that could be undone. All that can be turned off, just willing to do it. But we never talk about it in that sense. It's only, if you make $100,000 a year, then you'll be happy. No, you'll be $150,000 a year.
If that were true, folks who are making $100,000 or $250,000 a year would be happy.
Yep.
If being skinny makes you think you'll be happy, if that's the feeling that you're constantly chasing and not realizing that happiness is available to you right now, you're never going to get where you want to go.
Yep.
The thing that has been so eye-opening to me along the happiness spectrum, so to speak, is that we are conditioned to believe that we have to be happy all the time. And when you go on to social media and you see how everyone else is living their best life and you don't feel that for yourself, that something's wrong with you. No, nothing is wrong with you. You're human. What we have to realize is life is 50-50. It's 50% good. It's 50% bad. You cannot have the happiness without the unhappiness. You can't have the peace without the stress. You can't have the joy without the pain. It's the same thing where when you were talking about videotaping everything, you're like, well, if you videotape everything, then nothing becomes important, right? You need the duality in life in order to have that happiness. The moment you realize half of life is going to be hard, then it frees you up to the whole human experience. Is when we're fighting against the painful aspects of our life, thinking that they shouldn't be there instead of just existing in them, that we create all these problems for ourselves. So this whole idea of chasing happiness, I just want to be happy. Right. Do you? You just want to be happy. You want to be happy about murder. You want to be happy about rape. You want to be happy about kidnapping. You don't want to just be happy. You don't want to be in pain with the negative. So that's where it starts, in getting comfortable with the negative and how to process that. We've never been taught that.
And even if
that's
you go,
how you grow.
From I'm not good enough to maybe I am, to it doesn't matter, I'm going to prove it. It's going from a negative thought to a neutral thought, then to a positive thought. Because oftentimes we often think too, and I'm just reading about this now, is going from a negative thought to a positive thought, and that makes all the difference. No. Mm-hmm. Neutral thoughts, right in the middle.
It's called a bridge thought.
Yeah, because then you can...
Where you go from I'm not enough to I am enough. In the middle, you have a bridge thought of I'm becoming someone who's enough. And when you have that kind of thought process, man, it changes everything.
Mm-hmm. And it can be done for anybody. Black, white, male, female, Asian, Hispanic.
Democrat,
Republican. But yeah, if you're putting your political happiness, for example, on a politician, they're going to disappoint you.
They're going to disappoint you every single time. I am so grateful that you guys both were willing to come in today. I had no real idea of what we were going to talk about. You said to me, you texted me, so what are we going to talk about? Stuff.
Yeah.
I wanted this to be just a conversation that we would have over a beer or a glass of wine and some hors d'oeuvres, right?
Next time we'll bring the beer and wine.
And or we can go somewhere and record it, you know, as things open up more. The only thing I wanted to end with was the bold predictions, but because I feel like our conversations can go all over the place, and
we've proven that today,
right?
yes.
And we don't fight with one another because we can have differing opinions and still have a thoughtful, healthy conversation. And I think
just opinions.
They're just opinions,
not life.
And I think more and more people need to be able to do that. And I wish there was a way that I could wave a magic wand that would start dialogue between everybody. Because the more we talk to one another and the more we listen, I spent more time listening today. The more we listen, the more we accomplish, because we then start to hear what other people have to say.
I think you want to hug it out now. I
Yep.
mean, like, we started this whole thing with, like, you know, missing hugs. You just want to hug it out right now, don't you?
I'm at about a -8 on the hug scale. I need to get to a +10.
Absolutely.
So,
but I love that, Spanky, too, because you mentioned the car, right? If you're always looking behind you, you only have that perspective. Well, I only have one perspective. It's Rob's perspective.
Right.
But if I talk to Spanky, I talk to Pamela, I'm adding your perspective. So now my peripheral vision gets a little wider.
Correct.
And if I talk to someone of a different race or a different gender or someone who's trans, and I just talk to them and I listen to what they say and I ask them questions and they answer it honestly, now I'm like, oh, my perspective is super broad, because you want to get to the point where you have a 360 view.
What you're talking about is curiosity.
Exactly.
And I think that has been it's become a lost art form. Mm-hmm. And just being curious. Not being right, not being wrong, just being curious.
you don't have to stand your ground to learn something.
And
Exactly.
it's an epidemic in this country, the lack of curiosity. Well, why is that? Why do they do that? Mm-hmm. What is that about?
When did you know you were attracted to the same sex? Was it a decision? No, it wasn't a decision. Oh, interesting. Okay.
You know, what's it like?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
You know, it's being curious. You don't have to agree with the lifestyle in that example, but just being curious about it to learn more. It's this lack of curiosity. And I mean, you're a parent, Spanky. I'm a parent. That's where we can make a difference in fostering the curiosity of our children, instead of telling them, no, don't do that, because it's easier for them just to do what you want them to do and not answer their questions. Right. Allow them to ask those questions. Take the time to foster that curiosity. Rob, as a talk show host, you have a huge platform to just have people, you know, think. You know, they don't have to agree. They don't have to like, just think. Mm-hmm. And that is such a gift. So we all have the power to make positive change. It's just whether or not we choose to exercise it.
And I choose to exercise it.
Yeah, me too, every day.
That's my goal. Mm-hmm. My goal is to make the world a better place by making me a better person. And it starts with one person, right? You. We can each make a difference and an impact. I'm so grateful you guys came in today. This was like awesome to sit down, and thanks for the coffee.
You got it.
And my final notes for podcast listeners, thank you for listening. If you didn't like this episode, suck it. You know,
there's the positivity I was looking for, right?
My goal is to serve people and to bring all sorts of energy and thoughts and ideas. And sometimes I get to do this because it's my podcast. And that's okay. And if you don't like it, I'm cool with that. And I hope you keep listening, because it's not always like this. But I thought this was a great sit down, and I want to do another one. And we talked about this almost a decade ago.
Mm-hmm.
But we all were like, or at least, you know, I was, and wrapped up in, you know, non-competes, and you can't allow your likeness in other places. And
right.
So now, like, free at last. Yeah.
So there she is. She's free. So I'd love to do this again. We don't have to schedule it now, but thank you guys for joining and for being here and coming in in person.
Yes.
And thank you, air conditioning people.
For keeping us cool and reminding us about it.
Every
and letting us know every time you do it.
Exactly. Done.
That's a wrap.
V-nay. Man, that was easy
Powering
conversation.
off.